Good morning. My name's Tony, and I'm the lead pastor here at Gateway. Thank you, team, for a great. I tell you what, we are blessed for be a small church and have such great music. Just give them a hand. Yeah, just give them a hand. And if you think about it, wish Beth a happy birthday today. Today's her birthday. You know, I'm glad you showed up for work today. I'm thrilled about that. Well, today we're starting this brand new series called Out of the Dust. This is a series that kind of started in me about a year ago as we were planning, and I thought, oh man, it didn't fit last year, but I wanted to get it in, and I told the team, and it got in this year as Out of the Dust, and I want to start that today. So I get the privilege of opening this series for you today. So let me start by just making a very obvious statement, and if you want to say, thank you, Captain Obvious, this is good. You can say that under your breath, just don't say it to me. Nobody likes broken things. All right, thank you. I knew a couple of you would say something, and I had an idea who those people would be, and that was exactly the ones who said it. So. People just don't like broken things. Or let me rephrase that. Nobody likes it when something that is useful and important to them is broken. That's better, right? Like some things it's okay, you know, if you got to go to work and you go out and your car don't start, hey, great, I don't have to go to work today, right? I love it that my car's not working. You know, it's funny, somebody this week said that their furnace broke, and I thought, oh no, you know, this is not a good time to have your furnace broke, right? So you obviously don't like that. Somebody else told me they bought a new car, and was it you guys? You brought a new car, and you went to turn it on today, and nothing, right? Makes you feel all warm and fuzzy inside, doesn't it? Nobody likes it when the things that are important to them or useful to them or things that you need like in that moment, and they just don't work because they're broken. So the other day, I'm going to let you in on my personal private life. The other day, I replaced a broken toilet seat. It's been broken for a while. But it was one of those breaks that the seat itself wasn't broken. And you all are going to say, oh, I know what you're talking about. It was just an annoyance. It was only when you lifted it or closed it. It was on the back where it was attached, where it would, one of the things was broken, it would swing. Do y'all know what I'm talking about? Oh yeah, everybody's saying, yeah. It's like, you know, I wasn't going to tell because they're not here, but my kids, Kyle and Lauren, I went over to their house the other night, and, Noah was there, and for like the longest time, they've had a broken, now my son-in-law was a farmer, so he did the right thing. He duct taped the toilet seat. It's broke like in half on the seat itself, and he just duct taped it. And I'm like, son, come on. Let's go to Menards and buy you a toilet seat finally and fix it. But this toilet seat of mine was broken. It was finally my wife had just pestered me enough. She's like, we need a new toilet seat. And I was the one who really noticed it the most because I always raise and I always lower the toilet seat as I'm supposed to. Listen to me, fellas. Wife and 3 daughters, man. My mama trained me to raise the toilet seat when I go. Because when you're little, your mother was the one who usually had to clean it. So she was like, you raise that toilet seat. I'm telling you, if you don't. So I was raised and trained to raise the toilet seat. But it was my wife who taught me to lower the toilet seat. Funny story. I was taught to lower the toilet seat by my wife on our honeymoon night. So we're traveling, and I go to the restroom, and then I go to bed, and I am deep in sleep. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, I was woken up by this yelling from the bathroom. And I look over toward the bathroom, and it's pitch black in there. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, something terrible has happened. I did not put the toilet seat down, and she fell into the toilet. Let me tell you something. Since that night, and you can ask her, and it is true, I have never once not put the toilet seat down. There, that's just a little insight into my life. Has absolutely nothing to do with my sermon, other than I fixed a toilet seat the other day, right? Listen, 28 years of marriage, and I've never missed putting a toilet seat down. That is quite the track record. I am proud of it. Now I can tell all my pastor friends what I got applause for that, right? But the truth is, nobody likes it when something that is important or valuable to them, whether it's a car or a washing machine or a furnace or a toilet seat, is broken. Things that are broken lose something. I think there's 3 things that you would lose if something that's broken loses. The first one is this. It loses value. It just becomes less valuable. If it's not doing what it's supposed to do, how many of you would go online and pay brand new prices for something that is used and broken? You wouldn't do that, right? Because when something isn't quite as it was supposed to be or working as it's supposed to be, it loses its value. The second thing, I think, things lose their purpose. That toilet seat has a purpose. And if it's broken, it loses its purpose. It has a glorious purpose, by the way. But anything, a car, refrigerator, anything, if you break it, it was created and meant to do something specific. And if it doesn't do what it was meant to do, it doesn't have a purpose anymore. It ends up in a dumpster. And I think the third thing it loses is its beauty. I mean, when something is brand new and it's created and it's fulfilling its purpose and it has full value, there's just a beauty to it. Whether that's a car or a house or whatever. There's just this beauty to something when it is doing what it's supposed to do and it works. Nobody, though, today seems to be fixing anything, are they? We live in a throwaway culture. It is hard to find anyone that fixes things anymore. I remember my wife and I had a washing machine. From day one, that washing machine just didn't quite work right. We had so many repair people out until finally, after 3 years of messing around with this, we went to the company and said, look, this thing has just been a lemon. Well, sir, this is what they told me. Well, sir, your warranty's up after 3 years, and those things really aren't made to last longer than 3 years. I'm thinking a washing machine. And we just had to throw it away, right? And get a new one. But a lot of things are like that. Do you remember years ago there was a show called American Restoration? Do you remember that show? And people would bring like these wrecked, tore down, things had no value. People would look at these things and think, what in the world? They're broken, they're rusted, they just aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. And they would bring them to this guy and he would restore them. And he would restore them back to these amazing things like pinball machines and radios and cars and all kinds of things. And it was a thing of beauty when you took something that was broken and rusted and lost its value and its purpose, and he just repurposed it and gave it a new value and a new purpose and a new beauty. But there's just not a lot of people that do that anymore. People bring all sorts of broken old things to restore them. But the problem with the restoration was it was very, very time consuming and it was very, very expensive. Today, things are just simply made quick, cheap, and made to throw away, so you just buy a new one. We live in this throwaway culture. Things today break easily because they're made that way. But what about our lives? What about your life? It can be broken. It can be ripped apart and shattered and all sorts of things. We are fragile. Just like the things we use every day, life can become very, very fragile. It doesn't take much to break a person's emotions. You can break their spirit. You can break their heart. You can break their body. Say something terrible about somebody to their face. Abuse them. Lie to them. Betray them. Don't love them. Judge them. And you will break something in them. Little cracks begin to show up. Our bodies are fragile too, aren't they? I'm now in my 50s, and I realize this every morning that I sound like a popcorn machine walking into the restroom. The body just is fragile. It begins to break down. Sickness hits it. I talked to some of you, and you've gone through the flu, and you've gone through sickness, and you realize, you know very well that it's fragile. In a moment, you can become very sick. Cancer, diseases that do its work on us. We were once made in the image of God to be perfect and beautiful and of value and of purpose. But people today are broken. We've lost our value. We've lost our purpose. We've lost the intended reason that we were created to be something beautiful made in the image of God. Sin has done its work. Sin that we've committed, sin that people has committed against us, and sin that has had its effect on all of the fallen creation is affecting us. We are fragile. And we are broken. All of us has been broken and have fallen short of God's intended purpose for us. But the Bible actually speaks about this brokenness. It speaks about the fragility of humanity. It speaks about us being like jars of clay that are easily broken, easily crushed. The Bible speaks to this. The Apostle Paul, who knew suffering very well, this man would go out and he was beaten, he was made fun of, he was arrested and thrown in prison, he suffered for his mission to tell people about the good news of Jesus. The Apostle Paul knew suffering, and he wrote a letter to a church in Corinth. And in this letter, he talks about the fragility of life, but he gives this amazing truth that will help all of us today. And here's the thing. This truth might just be life or death to you. Because you are broken today and you're wondering if there's any hope. Is there any hope at all about this broken life? And can anything be fixed? Chapter 4 of 2 Corinthians, verse 6. Paul says, "For God, who said," he just said it, "let there be light in the darkness." Who else do you know that can do that? Let there be light. What's Paul talking about? He's talking about when God created all things and he just simply spoke the word and the sun came about. And in the darkness of space came light. He made this light shine in our hearts. He willed it. He said it. He wanted it to happen. So we could know the glory of God that is seen in the face of Jesus Christ. We now have this light shining in our hearts, but we ourselves, and here it is, we ourselves are like fragile clay jars containing this great treasure. A treasure. What is a treasure? Something of value, of purpose, of beauty. This makes it clear that our great power is from God, not from ourselves. So Paul is doing this comparison thing. He compares the human life to a jar of clay, a fragile jar of clay. More than likely, if you study this, Paul is making a reference to these. They were little cheap pottery lamps that was probably made in the streets or somewhere there and sold in the streets of Corinth. They were one of the most common and popular things that people would purchase. They were cheap. They were very thin. Why were they thin? So that the light could actually come through them. But making them thin and making them cheap and making them common made them very fragile. I would guess if you were to go to a place where they were making these things and they made them like crazy because it was one of the most used things because light was important, right? We don't understand. We come in and flip the switch on, but in that day, once the sun went down, it was dark. And all they had was little lamps, and they would make these. And I imagine if you'd go to the pottery where they're making them, there would probably be piles and piles and heaps of broken clay lamps because they're fragile. And once they break, what are they going to do with them, right? Throw them away. Throw them to the side. Throw them to the heap. Discard them. They were the thinnest vessels made, making them fragile, but letting more light come out. And so here's what Paul does. When he's comparing the human life to a jar of clay, he picks, get this, he picks the cheapest, the least valuable, the most common, and the most fragile thing that he can think of to compare us to it. Paul understood the fragility of life. He wants it to be clear that life is fragile, easily broken by a number of things. And it's easy to lose value and purpose and beauty. But God has chosen to put in these fragile jar clays, our bodies and our souls, our persons, a great treasure. God has chosen to bring back the broken lives with value, with beauty, and with purpose. What is this treasure? What is he talking about? Is light treasure? Yeah. But he's talking about the light of the gospel. He's talking about the good news. That this light is a knowledge of knowing God. That this light says that you can know yourself and you can know God. And it is a treasure that God has chosen to put inside of us. Knowing that his love is strong for you. Knowing that his purpose is real for you. That his desire for you is real. Jesus is the visible full image of God on earth. To look into Jesus' face is to look into the face of God. To see Jesus and how he lived and how he behaved tells us everything that we need to know about God. But Jesus is also the visible and the full image of the human race, being fully God and fully human. Jesus is the visible image of what we are intended to be. To look at him is to see the possibility of a new humanity. From broken to alive. From torn apart to being put back together. For you see, Jesus too was broken. And his life was torn apart by sin, just like yours and just like mine. And this treasure, it is the glory of God, meaning not just radiance or shining appearance, but it is the actual presence of God Almighty in the person of Jesus living in us, shining in us. That Jesus is the very demonstration of God on earth. It is the presence of God in my life. And Paul is saying, look, you are fragile, like a clay pot that's easily broken. And most of you have probably already been broken, but God has chosen to put something in you that should give you hope. It should change your life. It should give you a new perspective, a new value, a new purpose, a new beauty. What is it? It's His presence. God has chosen to dwell in you. I'm going to let you think about that for a minute. Paul was just like, oh. God chooses to live in us. The treasure is His presence. It's Him. It's the knowledge that God is here, even in my suffering, and in my brokenness, and in my hurting, and in all that's happening in my life, and that it will ever happen in my life. God is with you. And that's a treasure. So God has placed this treasure in us as fragile jars of clay so that the world, listen, so that the world might see and know this incredible power, the power of God at work in the lives of broken people. Listen, this is true. God shines through the brokenness of people. The cracks and breaks and fissures in your life, God in you shines through you to those around you. Next verse he says, we are pressed on every side by troubles, but we are not crushed. We are perplexed, but not driven to despair. We are hunted down, but never abandoned by God. We get knocked down, but we are not destroyed. In other words, Paul is saying, stuff happens, man. Things happen in life. We're fragile. We have no control over it. Things are going to happen, but guess what? The power of God is in you. Look up. Have hope. Life is unpredictable. It can be troublesome. It can be perplexing, and even it can be lonely. But Paul might say to us, not if, but when you're broken, what is seen through the cracks of your life, those broken pieces of your life, matters. Verse 10. Through suffering, Paul says, our bodies continue to share in the death of Jesus. He's still comparing this. He's like, look, it's in the suffering that we're most like Jesus. So that the life of Jesus may also be seen in our bodies. So there's this tension in my life that I might get in some trouble here this morning today. And this is not my intent to offend anybody, but Christians annoy me. I annoy myself sometimes too, but Christians can really be annoying. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's around certain beliefs about what God really intends for our lives. There is this belief, and this is especially around the theology of miracles. And you can go to different tribes and different people and different things like that. And there's this belief, well, it's mostly in the American church, by the way, because we are so spoiled and consumed with ourselves and consumeristic about our religion. You know, what have you done for me lately kind of thing. That God just wants us to have this perfect, healthy, stress-free, wealthy, life, shining like a bright light in a dark world, right? The minute something goes wrong, I get cancer or I get sick or I lose my job or whatever is going on in your life, we begin to think that God just wants to give us a miracle. We beg God for comfort. We beg Him to heal us. We beg Him to take this from me. We beg Him to fix this in my life. Why aren't you fixing this? I must not have enough faith. And there are some who will actually teach and try to accuse you of not having enough faith because God's not doing something in your life. And then I read this, and Paul says, hey, do you realize it's actually in the suffering that you're most like Jesus? Don't put that up there yet. You're moving too fast for me. You just took all the air out of the room, man. You all just ignore that. You didn't see that, okay? It's a relationship that he's on me and I'm on him. He's got to be with me here. We beg God for comfort. We beg Him to heal us. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't seek God. I'm not saying that we shouldn't ask God to touch and heal and fix. I'm not saying that at all. But Paul and other biblical writers who knew Jesus in real life, they saw their suffering very differently. Are you following me? They saw it very differently. They saw it as an opportunity to actually share in something that Jesus went through Himself. I wouldn't say we wish it upon ourselves, but when it happens, Paul would say, look, suffering breaks me like a clay pot with cracks, but listen, the treasure that is in me is greater than the world that my clay pot lives in. See, we tend to think it's the things we overcome or the miracles in our life that speak the loudest to people. Look what God did for me. But it's not. It's the way we live out our brokenness, not our perfection, that makes the difference. God help us, church. We're all trying to be so perfect that we just don't want people to see our brokenness. And Paul is saying, look, it's in my brokenness that God shines the brightest. It's our brokenness that enables Jesus to speak the loudest. Now you can put it up there. God doesn't waste our pain. He uses it to create something beautiful. So if you're here and you are broken and you're going through it, there's no reason to feel shame about that. Paul didn't feel shame about his brokenness or his suffering, but he saw it as an opportunity to share in the death of Jesus Christ and His pain and suffering. And he saw it as an opportunity for the light that lives in him to shine out. I'm going to ask our worship team to come. So perhaps we just simply leave our lives. We live our lives. Let me say that again. Perhaps we love our lives more than Jesus. What do I mean by that? We don't want to share in His suffering. We just want Him to do this thing for us. Perhaps we love our comfort more than we love Jesus. Perhaps we love our reputations, church, more than we love Jesus. Because Paul is saying, when I'm suffering, I'm sharing in Jesus' suffering. We try to fix, we try to cover up the cracks in our broken life. We hide, we lie, we put our masks on, and we pretend that everything is okay. But listen, what is on the inside is too painful and dark and ugly, so I just can't let it out. It can't be seen. But what is on the inside matters. And that's what Paul's saying. God has put on the inside of you a treasure that is Jesus. Have you ever heard of kintsugi art? Anybody ever heard of kintsugi art? Do you know what kintsugi art is? Do you really? Have you ever done any? No. Why not? It's too hard. No. Actually, that's a good illustration. It is hard to put something that's broken back together again, isn't it? So, kintsugi art is a Japanese art that repairs broken pottery with gold. I was actually going to try to get an actual real kintsugi art piece, but I couldn't afford it. It's literally gold that is used to fuse the broken pieces back together. Here's a picture of a piece of kintsugi art. This one was cheap. I got it off the internet. Now are you following me? Have anybody seen kintsugi art? It's called kintsugi art, yeah. It renders a new piece that is more beautiful than it was before you broke it. Rather than trying to hide the damage, kintsugi actually highlights the repair. The imperfections are what make it beautiful. The imperfections are what make it valuable. A broken clay jar that is put back together has a better story. It's more authentic. It's stronger than something that has stayed pristine its whole life. Catherine and Jay Wolfe wrote a book called Suffer Strong, where they introduced kintsugi art. Jay Wolfe says this: the story of kintsugi art, this style of pottery, may be the most perfect embodiment of all our trauma-shattered lives. Instead of throwing away the broken, beloved pottery, we fix it in a way that doesn't pretend it hasn't been broken, but honors the breaking, and more so, the surviving. By highlighting those repaired seams with gold lacquer. Now the object is functional again. It's dignified. It has not been discarded. It's stronger and even more valuable because it is reinforced, because of its reinforced and golden scars. Jesus is a kintsugi artist who likes to put people back together and heal the brokenness in your life. But here's the thing. It's the bright, shining gold that stands out. It's Him living in you. We are broken vessels. And we shouldn't be ashamed of that. But we should be excited that God has chosen to live in us. Listen to this song.
Pieces broken and scattered, in mercy gathered, mended and whole, empty-handed but not forsaken. I've been set free. I've been set free. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was was blind, but now I see. I can see it now. I can see the love in your eyes, laying yourself down, raising up the broken to life. You take our failure, you take our weakness. You set your treasure in jars of clay. So take this heart, Lord, I'll be your vessel, the world to see your life in me. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Oh, I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. I can see it now. I can see the love in your eyes, laying yourself down, raising up the broken to life. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Oh, I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Oh, I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. I can see it now. I can see the love in your eyes, laying yourself down, raising up the broken to
Me this morning, just stand with me, and I want to do something this morning to close out our service. All you who are broken, trauma in your life, you feel the brokenness. Maybe you can't put your finger on that brokenness yet, but there's something just not right in you. Pain, suffering, perhaps acting out, different things that come from this brokenness. I want to make an invitation for you. I want to ask everyone just to come forward this morning as I want to pray for you and close this out properly. So if you're broken this morning and you just want prayer, just come on down. Don't feel ashamed of it. I'm broken. There's so much in my life and things that have happened in my life. I am broken. And I need this treasure to shine bright in me. Just come. So, part of the steps to recovery and celebrate recovery, step number 8, the last step, says this. Once you've gone through and you've identified your brokenness and your pain and your suffering, it says this: yield myself to God to be used to bring good news to others. For some of you, you're feeling like there is absolutely no way I can share or minister to other people through my brokenness. Both through my example and my words. The truth is, we're all broken. We have this trauma, we have this abuse, we have these bad decisions that we've made in our life, or these things that just hurt us. God, like a great kintsugi artist, wants to turn your brokenness into something that is bright and beautiful and purposeful beyond you. God doesn't waste pain. He uses it to create something beautiful. So what do you do with that? The first thing you do this morning is you invite Jesus into your brokenness. Say, I can't do this. It's beyond me. I confess that I'm not the treasure you are. I can try to cover it up. I can wear masks. I can try to put on this false sense of who I am, but it's not authentic. Or you can just be you, broken, needy, and say, Jesus, please come into my brokenness. The second thing you can do is begin to share your brokenness, whether with a therapist, whether with a trusted friend, a pastor, life group. You need to begin to talk about the areas of your life that you're broken. And then you begin to look for opportunities to serve other broken people. That's what Paul was really getting at. Yes, I'm broken, but it's not crushed me. I'm not down for the count. If anything, God just wants to use that to help other people. Here's a great example. Perhaps you have some trauma or abuse in your childhood. Maybe you have the pain still there of a broken family, or broken parents who divorced, or maybe you grew up without a dad or without a mom, and that's a pain, that's a brokenness in your life. What can you do with that? How about you volunteer to serve children so that they might know that there's adults who love them and care about them, that you might be in pain and I'm not your dad, but I just want you to know that I love you. I want the best for you, and I'll do anything for you. See what happens when you begin to let that treasure shine through the brokenness in your life? You begin to help other people. Let me pray for you. Father, this morning, those that have come, we're acknowledging our brokenness this morning. As we begin this new series on this Out of the Dust, we know that you're a God that forms and shapes things that's just dirt into something of value and purpose and meaning. You are beautiful, and you've chosen to rest and reside and dwell in us, broken, without value, without purpose, and not very beautiful. May you be the gold that shines through. May you be the light that comes through, so when people look at our lives, they don't see something that's fake and inauthentic, but they see something that is real and broken, but something beautiful and with purpose as we begin to give back. So, Father, bless them. Bless their lives. Begin to shine. Bring people into their lives that they can share with. And may we be a church that's authentic. That we don't fake it until we make it. We don't pretend that we've got it all together, because we don't. But may we be a church and a people that has a great treasure that we just want other people to know about. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful week. You're dismissed.